What's going on, guys? Tonight we're going to continue our series on how we started our homestead here, and we left it off in 2019. We just had finished working on the house. We gutted a house and remodeled it in roughly 8 months. I jokingly said it's never done, but we did move in. We got to enjoy our first Christmas in the house together, and we got to really plan for 2020. Now, when we started 2020, obviously we didn't know what was about to happen and the world was about to shut down and everything like that. But the very first thing we planned was a large garden. I always thought that was kind of the easiest way to start homesteading, and I would recommend that to anybody. Is start somewhere, start with a garden. Literally, you can grow plants in a couple pots on your porch if you want, to really just get a feel for how to grow things and how to produce some of your own food. But our first garden, I wanted to go big right away. That's just always, kind of my vision, is try to do the most I possibly can, tend to take on way too much at a time. So we had a nice field across the little creek from our house, and planted roughly a 40 by 40 garden. And the first picture here you're going to see is just literally a tarp in a field in late winter. Put a tarp down and let the sun kind of bake that soil a little bit, kill off all the grass. So it's kind of funny that this is where it started. It's just a black tarp in a field, and it did turn into a pretty nice garden, I must say. We put a ton of work into it. Dug a bunch of raised beds, some just ground beds, some rows, typical row planting there, and we got a lot of production out of it the first year. The garden was our first big step. Some things I would do differently, and some things I would definitely repeat. But again, we spent hours and hours in that garden, getting our first real harvest here on the farm. As the garden got situated, our next step again was just continue to just take on as much as we possibly could. And I'd always wanted chickens. I always thought that was a pretty easy gateway to some sort of livestock. Love eggs, I eat a lot of eggs, so it was something I figured would be easy, get chickens. So we built the coop, and I picture the coop here as well. A lot of fun building a chicken coop. It was kind of our first, I guess, extra project, you would say, aside from working endlessly on the house. Got to put the chicken coop together, and it was just kind of cool to do something different and to transform an area on your property that you knew was going to have some life on it there. So we got chickens, and that was kind of right as everything started to shut down. You had all these lockdowns, and I know in my case particularly at work, started to work extremely long hours. We had some individuals that just didn't feel comfortable working, so we were short-staffed, as was everybody. We'd run into Lowe's, and you'd have certain hours that you were allowed to go into the store, and they didn't have staff, so it got really weird as far as doing home projects, which obviously we were trying to do something and getting something done every weekend. We at least got the chickens, though. Simple pick them up at Tractor Supply. I believe the first breeds we got were Leghorns and Australorps. I believe they were a mix, so the Leghorns are white, the Australorps are black. And we put them in the coop as soon as we got it finished there, and we had chickens, and that was definitely. So now we're at a garden, we're at chickens. Shortly thereafter, I did place our first order for ducks. Didn't have any infrastructure built. I just figured, spur of the moment, we're gonna get ducks, and we're gonna tractor them. We're gonna run a meat run of ducks there. So ordered a dozen ducks, and I'll picture a picture of our A-frame tractor. Wasn't the best design. I would probably definitely do it different, but it did the job, and there are some remains of it still in our pig pen here, kind of falling apart a few years later. But the tractor did its job. We put a little duck pool in there, and we moved them every day as you would with any tractor or chicken. And the ducks turned out phenomenal. They got pretty big, 5-6 pounds of duck. So a nice little sized duck, and like I said, we raised a dozen of them for meat. So it was nice to put duck meat in the freezer. So in true fashion of taking on way too much at one time, obviously we had the garden, we started the chickens, started the ducks. My wife and I also found out around that time, spring of 2020, that we were expecting our first, which is our beautiful baby girl now, who's now almost 3 years old already. But obviously the news of expecting your first while you're taking on all this was a little overwhelming for sure, but definitely a blessing for us, and couldn't be happier to have her around today. Obviously, anytime you get news you're having a baby is really exciting, but just the chaos of the world at the time. Like I said, we were working 12 hours. I wasn't getting out of work until 9, sometimes 10 o'clock at night, and then trying to do all of this at the same time. It just felt like the year went so fast, and it was really our first full year into this. We learned a ton. We were always busy, always taking on projects. Hindsight, I do feel kind of bad for my wife. We didn't really get out much. We didn't get away much. And I guess that's kind of a regret with it. But I know she's also very grateful in all the work that we put in and how far we went that year. It really was just such an amazing experience, and it really brings the definition of new life on the farm and a lot of excitement on what's to come in years ahead of us. There were some downs in between, as there always is. That winter, we did lose our first flock of chickens. So they had just come into production, just started laying eggs, and not really sure what took them. I believe it might have been a raccoon. Raccoons are known for pulling the heads off of chickens. So that's how we found a few. Some went missing. Could have been multiple predators, but we did lose our entire first flock. And another kind of disaster in 2020 was actually, believe it or not, Christmas. It was our daughter's first Christmas, and we had a pretty bad storm. And I can't even remember at this point. I mean, it was only a few years ago. Can't even remember if it was snow, ice, wind, whatever it was. But either way, we lose power quite a bit here. I always joke, a thunderstorm comes through and we're losing power no matter what. So with that, we've obviously set up some generators and transfer switches, things like that, to kind of make it easier for us. But the first year, obviously, we weren't as prepared. We did have a generator, but when you lose power out here and you don't have heat, and you have a 1 month old, it was made for a miserable Christmas for sure. I remember sitting there with electric space heaters in our living room, and it was interesting to say the least. It was definitely a stressful situation because at that point, you're really worried about the safety of your baby and not necessarily trying to enjoy the holiday. So we definitely barricaded off rooms and kept as warm as possible. But obviously we made it through, and we definitely quickly learned how to plan for stuff like that. And now we built in those resiliencies, and obviously we can withstand storms, power outages. It's basically a flip of a switch, a pull of a cord, and we're back in business, furnace runs, everything like that. So again, a huge takeaway from 2020. Always have backup power. You hear that all over the place in the preparedness world, and it's no joke, especially in the heart of winter. And aside from losing those chickens and having a rough Christmas, obviously the year in itself just being extremely odd and something that nobody has ever experienced before. 2020 was honestly probably one of the best years that I've had, aside from obviously 2018 when we got married. I mean, welcoming our baby into the world, and just all the new growth that we put together on this farm, and all the projects that we completed, and got to move into our first home. And I mean, the list goes on and on. I think 2020 we learned a lot. I think if you can honestly say you didn't learn anything in 2020, I question your pulse a little bit, but I do. I truly think 2020 was a great year for us to learn. I mean, it helped us really understand kind of why we wanted to do this in the first place, and why this is so important, why we decided to raise our own food in the first place. When there were shortages and things like that, obviously we were in no position to just say we're self-sufficient here, but it really, every little bit counted. You know, anything you could produce on your own, you really learned that you could cut out any sort of system. You know, you didn't have to rely on the system for your food. You didn't have to rely on the system for, you know, egg production or vegetables out of your garden. And it really was kind of eye-opening for me in particular, and kind of opened up a whole new can of worms as, okay, we're gonna go even faster than ever and continue this journey. And we're gonna share the next year on another day. But again, that was 2020 for us. Crazy year of growth, year of learning, year of starting a family, and really the beginning of our homestead. So thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. If you like what we do, please support us by subscribing. Once again, thanks for listening.